Thank you everyone for joining us for one of the concurrent sessions. My name is Luke O'Sullivan. I'm the Fisheries Director of Fisheries Management with the Victorian Fisheries Authority. So I'm your host for this morning. So thank you all for joining us, and no doubt there'll be people sort of coming and going as we go through the sessions with the different speakers. So please bear with us. So the area that we're looking at today is the recreational fishing participation and diversity, promotion and education is the theme for our speakers and topics for today. Our first speaker today, Eva Lai. She is the research scientist at the Department of Fisheries in Western Australia, and she's going to be talking to us about measuring recreational fishing participation and satisfaction as a key performance indicator from communities surveys in Western Australia. Eva's a little nervous, so please bear with her, and she'll be terrific. So everyone please join me in welcoming Eva. Thanks, Eva.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm actually Eva Lai from the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development in Western Australia. Our fishery management goals are to manage the state fisheries in an economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable manner. Hence, it is important to understand the community satisfaction and support of our management strategies across 4 key management areas: the commercial fisheries, recreational fishery, agriculture, and protection of fish habitats. Also, it is very important to understand the recreational fishers' behaviour and their attitudes towards the fishery policy. It is because recreational fishing is a very popular outdoor activity in Western Australia. The number of recreational fishers has increased from 299,000 in 86-87 to 633,000 in 21-22 in proportion with population growth. And the expenditure attributable to recreational fishing has increased from $55 million to $2.4 billion. And so today's my talk is about a community survey that we have used since 1989 to examine key aspects of recreational fishing and appreciation of the aquatic environment by the community, and assess their understanding and satisfaction to our management strategies. This survey is an annual telephone recall survey with quota sampling. Respondents are age 18 and over, stratified by gender, age, and location based on the Australian Bureau of Statistics estimated resident population of Western Australia. This survey provides the department with key performance indicators, including the participation rate in recreational fishing and community satisfaction for the utilization of community resources, and satisfaction rates of community perception to the extent in which our department is achieving the aquatic resource management objectives. So the survey asked the participants about the perception of our department's performance in the 4 key management areas. The overall satisfaction rate for 21-22 was 85%. And in fact, the satisfaction rates have varied over time within the range of 75 to 85%, from 75 to 95%. So this provides us with encouragement and affirmation of our fishery management strategies. So in here, the plot on the left shows the participation rate by gender, from 0708 at the top down to the most recent year, 21-22. And the plot in the middle showed the participation rate by age group, and the plot on the right showed the estimated number of fishes. And the participation rate of 25% in 21-22 was similar to those in recent years. And it was consistent with the long-term slight declining trend observed since the late 90s, where the historical participation rate was around 32%. The gender and age group proportions were relatively consistent over time, with the male fishers aged 25 to 64 being the dominant group. Although the fishing participation rate has slowly declined, the number of fishers has increased in proportion with the population growth. And the survey also asked the fishers about their fishing experience. Over the last 10 years, the average satisfaction rate were about 60% in terms of the number of fish caught, the variety and the size of the fish. However, the average satisfaction rates on the fishing environment and the overall trip experience were around 90%. So in other words, most of the fishers enjoy their fishing experience, even though their catch of the day may not be appreciated. The survey also asked the fishermen how knowledgeable they were with the bed limits and size and boat limits. And it is because separately, because the boat limits were introduced in 2009, and the research showed that on average more than 80% of the fishers were knowledgeable of the bed and size limits for the fish they planned to catch, and about 75% of the fishers were knowledgeable of the boat limits for the fish they planned to fish from a boat. And this reflects the effectiveness of public education on fishing rules. "15 and 20 years ago, the main channel from where people seeking recreational fishing information, including fishing regulations, was through the word of mouth and print media such as newspaper, fishing magazine, brochure, and publication from the department. In recent years, it was found that the main channel from where people seeking the information was digital media, including our department websites, social media, mobile apps, and internet. So this reflects the changes in feeding information to the public. So in summary, the community is satisfied with the department's achievement in management goal, and fishers are satisfied with their fishing experience. Digital media has become, including the department's websites and other media like the Fisheries mobile apps, has become the main channel from where people seeking recreational fishing information today. Annual estimate of the participation are used to inform the social value of recreational fishing, and can be used to measure policy that seek to improve recreational fishing participation. And the 2022-23 communications survey is underway with a concurrent trial of a hybrid survey design to improve future monitoring. And one thing I want to mention is we are the only state in Australia having an annual community survey to estimate the recreational fishing participation. And it will be interesting to compare the result from the National Recreational Fishing Survey, which we present in a special section later on in this today's afternoon. So last things, I want to say thank you to the participants in our survey, and also to Roy Morgan Research Institute for conducting the survey on behalf of our department. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, for that presentation. That was very insightful about the perceptions over in Western Australia of fishing. One thing that I've done since I've come back into the fishing space is I've reviewed my bucket list of fishing that I want to undertake. And certainly it looks like the West Australian fishers are very satisfied with what they're getting over in WA, so I might have to put going to WA on my bucket list for fishing. I think I've added a fair few over the last day and a half already. Now go on to our next speaker. Just need to, there we go. Our next speaker is Mattias Baenziger. Did I get that right? I probably, my apologies if I didn't quite get that right. And Mattias will be talking to us about the golden opportunity in fostering community support and tourism, promoting recovery in the face of adversity. So I'll hand over to Mattias. Thanks very much.
Just press play. There we go. Good morning, everyone. My name's Mattias Baenziger. I'm a Fisheries Officer in Malgorzata in Far Eastern Victoria, and I'm here to basically give you a talk about a summary of the Golden Tag program, which was a initiative by the Victorian Fisheries Authority in promoting tourism back to regional areas that were affected by the bushfires. I wish to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which we gather on today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. In 2019, quite possibly Australia's largest bushfires in history devastated eastern Victoria and the east coast of Australia. Approximately, 1 billion wildlife were lost in these fires and displaced a lot of regional communities. But in terms of these areas, the tourism was most affected, peak Christmas period time, where most businesses and earn their annual income. Large parts of these communities were either evacuated for long period of times or, such as Malgorzata, which were evacuated to other areas of Victoria and New South Wales. And displaced, and basically no tourism happened for the peak period of time for about 3 months. About 1 million hectares of land were burnt across East Gippsland, some of which 100% of key national parks were burnt, and that just shows you the extent of the significant bushfires in the region. The Victorian Fisheries Authority had an on-the-ground impact in the initial evacuation phase, providing boat support and things like that. But as an authority, we were looking at more ways to support the community to reboost that tourism in the area post the fires, and hence we embarked on our largest competition ever, the Golden Tag competition. So in eastern and northeast Victoria, we tagged approximately 1,000 fish, where the first 10 people were able to collect $10,000. So, a lot of money for a tag recapture program, and every other fish after that $10,000 were worth $2,000. So off we went, and we went and tagged, a variety of fish species. That's a trout in northeast Victoria, a dusky flathead, in key recreational fishing areas. So Bem River, Malgorzata, up in the northeast, the Kiwa, Eildon, and places like that. So both marine and freshwater species. And on the 1st of March 2020, we were off, and we had our first winner, $10,000. The engagement in the community was really strong. Myself as an officer on the ground, every single person you came across wanted to know how many fish were there, where were they tagged, what sort of species, even to the point where we had people that had never fished in their life before engaged in this program. And so it was a real big boost after what devastated these communities. And we were going really well, some fantastic captures across the northeast, regional Victoria, kids, families, everyone got out there. And then, of course, as we all know, COVID hit a month later. Stop fishing. In Victoria, fishing was banned. you know, it's something so foreign. But, you know, that's what happened. And from there, you know, there was a month into the program, we had 36 recaptures, you know, about $100,000, and the program stopped. And we had to reassess, and what it allowed us to do in this time from when it started in March and then stopped in April, then started in June and stopped again, was allowed us to go, okay, well, we're not only bushfire communities that have been affected, we've also got regional areas across the state that have been impacted by the effects of COVID and tourism and things like that. So we were able to expand the program even further, and it became a statewide opportunity to expand the golden tag program. So, you know, pelagic fish such as kingfish and bluefin tuna, Murray cod, black bream, we were able to put extra $10,000 tags out in those areas. And of course, with any tag recapture program, there's some fantastic scientific data that comes out of it, and some great stories. So this estuary perch was, you know, tagged in 2020 and recaptured 80 kilometres further west, and, you know, 770 days at liberty and grew in 4 centimetres. Dusky flathead, you know, almost just 1 day shy of 1,000 days, grew 11 centimetres in length. And that fish there has to be released in Victoria because it's a slot-sized fish. And a Murray cod example of 2 fish tagged on the same day, one going north up the Murray and the other going south. So, in summary, we had 158 winners with the Victorian Fisheries Authority paying out close to $500,000 to lucky people. But they were not necessarily the big winners. The big winners were regional areas that, you know, received this boost of people coming back into the areas, spending their money, you know, with an average trip estimated to be about $338 per recreational fisher on a trip. And then when we got into the data, we started to see some interesting aspects of it. So the percentage of recaptured by tag fish by species. So we found that, you know, Murray cod, rainbow trout, redfin and brown trout, all freshwater species, you know, were recaptured the most for the number of tags that were put in, and then it slowly declined in dusky flathead and some of our saltwater species in bigger inlets that were naturally sourced fish rather than stocked fish, such as Murray cod. Our largest captured, or number of recaptures by location, over 1,000 fish are put in eastern Victoria, so there's no surprises why our local river systems, Malgorzata, Bem River, Lake Tyers receive the most recaptures, and then our other smaller waterways in the inland. Percentage of tagged fish released or retained, so 30% of the fish that were caught by golden tag winners were released, 70% retained. You know, part of this could be a bit of miscommunication with, you know, you could actually release the fish and take a photo of the tag, and so someone else had the opportunity to win the program. I think a lot of people that we talked to kept them because they were a bit unsure on if they, you know, the system of claiming their prize. And in 2021, the VFA commissioned a report with Marsden Jacob, and, you know, found that they had a 3-to-1 investment return on their initial investment. It changed the behaviour of 8,800 fishers. The program was attributable to 56,000 fishing days, and, you know, value added about approximately $1 million to regional areas and communities. But as we know, the economic impact is only one small part of this. It was also about getting people out into the areas, both in the COVID times and bushfires, and promoting community wellbeing and outdoor recreation. This young lady, Brodie Cummings, is a local Malgorzata resident. She lost her house in the bushfires, and she was able to get out there and was one of the lucky $10,000 tags. But more importantly for Brodie, as she's told local fishery staff, it was not about the money, it was about just being able to get out there and that positive outdoor recreation of recreational fishing. There were some learnings from the program from our stakeholders. We needed to do better marketing across a variety of platforms to further show the program and its success stories. Prizes, you know, whilst the $10,000 is great, a lot of regional businesses would have preferred, you know, the money being spent back into the community in regional shops that might be the form of gift vouchers and accommodation and packages such as that. It could become a standard approach to boosting regional tourism. So the VFA does a lot of stocking programs as it is, and there's opportunities to tag fish in those stocking programs to further enhance tourism in those areas. And you need coloured tags to delineate between the different research projects. You know, we had a couple people present ARI tagged fish. Unfortunately, they weren't able to receive a prize. We had DPI tags that were handed in, but it needed to be the specific VFA winner one. So, you know, different coloured tags, maybe go even a more golden colour than a yellow. But that's just one of the learnings. Oop. And these are just some of the lucky winners from the Golden Tag program. So 158 winners, but the big winners were the regional towns in Victoria throughout, both after COVID and, you know, after the bushfires. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mattias. That's a wonderful program that after the bushfires and particularly COVID as well was able to encourage some of the metropolitan people to get out into the regions and spend some money and help some of those communities deal with those impacts, particularly down in East Gippsland with the fires and then COVID straight off the back of that. So that's a great program, and congratulations to everyone at the VFA that was involved in that. That was really appreciated by people in the regions. And we'll come back to questions later on at the end of the sessions, all the sessions. We can ask some more questions about that. Our next speaker is...
Can you pronounce it?
This one's going to be a challenge for me. I'll give it a go. Malgorzata, is that close?
It's okay. No need.
And then she's going to be speaking on the expectations of future trends in increased recreational fishing activities and angular behaviour in the Nordic countries, a Delphi approach. So I'll hand over to you to tell us how to pronounce your name properly.
Do I use this one for slides, right? For moving them?
It should be, yeah. That one.
No.
And then I think we just press... Which one were you?
Just use the mouse to press on the name. A mouse.
Oh, a mouse.
The mouse, okay. It's not... Okay, and now, right? No? And then what should I just... I'm just checking how it works. I guess... Yes. Okay, welcome everyone. We are going north. Been in Australia, so now it's time for Nordic countries. I guess you know where it is, but I will show you a map just in case later. Europe, anyway, far away, long travel. And I'm going to present results of a study that we did across all Nordic countries. And we use so-called Delphi survey. How many of you know Delphi survey approach? Okay, not that many, but I have a really nice slide explaining that. Okay, let's see. And I tried to list all my co-authors, but there were quite many because it's across all these 5 countries. So I hope I didn't miss anyone, but you see names there. And my name is difficult, but yeah, it's a Polish name. But I've been living in Sweden for a while now, like a lot. Okay, so basic idea was to look into what are the trends for anglers' behavior, anglers' participation in different fishing activities in Nordic countries. And we focus on different angling techniques, fishing in different environments, fishing for different species, and different behavior aspects. We covered five Nordic countries. You see them on the map. Okay, maybe it's not that good map because it doesn't show where the Europe is, but I guess this you know already. Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, Nordic countries. And we asked for, we wanted to explore the trend until 2030. When we started in 2019, it seemed that it's nice to look a decade ahead. Now we have 2023 already, and this paper is not submitted yet. But very soon, hopefully, it's almost ready. So Delphi, it's a consensus-based method. Basically, you gather data systematically by asking experts' opinion. And it's usually used to explore some kind of predictions about some future developments on some issue. And it's often used to inform decision making. It happens usually in a third round, so you have 3 surveys that goes one after another. The first round is quite open-ended questions. Basically, you do some kind of scoping of the issue. So in this survey, we ask the experts what kind of trends they see in recreational fishing participation and different angling activities, and also what would be the potential drivers behind these trends. I'm not presenting here the driver part. It's the other paper. We're very efficient in using our data. There will be 2 papers very soon. So here it's mostly about participation in different kind of activities and different behaviors. Then you go to a second round. So you get responses from the first round. You analyze the data. Basically, you code open-ended responses into different categories. And then based on that, you create a more qualitative survey, the second round, which is you have some statements based on the first round, and then you ask the experts to rank them in some way. And here it was ranking about different behaviors, different angling activities. So what's the expected direction and magnitude? So basically, will this kind of activity increase or decrease in the future? How much will it increase? How much will it decrease? And then when you got the responses, you go to a third round. And in the third one, you use basically the same statements you had in the second round, but you also provide the experts with their own responses. So how did you rank this before? And you also provide them a mean, range, and standard deviation of all other experts. So they can see their responses, and if they want, they can adjust or change their own response. We did a survey between 2019 2022. Normally, it doesn't take so much time, but the pandemic happened, and there was a lot of delays with responses, with our own analysis. That's why it took so long time. Unfortunately, should have been finished earlier, but yeah, things happen. We are aiming at 20 experts per country, so having 100 experts in total, ended up with 93 that responded to all 3 rounds of the survey. So I think it's quite a good response rate. We focus, as I said already, on different angling techniques, so like fly fishing, spin fishing, and other that experts from different countries mentioned in the first round. Types of angling, so it could be about fishing in different environments like street fishing or river fishing or coastal fishing or whatever. Could be also a combination of these two, like here example, like angling for sea trout on the coast, for example. Then we ask also about some specific behaviors, like linked to stewardship, some social interactions, use of technologies, and also catch orientation. And I will show you some results. There's a lot of results in this study, so I just picked up some of them. When the paper comes out, you can see all the details, or almost all of them. I don't know, maybe we'll put them in supplementary materials or something, because there is too much. But it's very interesting with looking into all these things. So starting a bit with angling techniques, what's interesting that in all countries, the experts believed that fly fishing will go up. It will be much more, there will be increase. On the other hand, the ice fishing would go down. This was the expected trend. And as you see here, I didn't highlight other things, and I don't think we have time to go into details, but yeah, the paper will come, and then you will see this. When it comes to angling in different environments, both fishing in lakes and rivers was expected to also increase, with an exception of Denmark, where fishing in rivers will rather decrease, and then maybe in Norway there was not that much clear trend, and most experts actually said that there would be the same, and nothing would change. There would be no increase, no decrease. There was also expectation that both in Iceland and Sweden, fishing in remote areas would increase, and there was no clear trend in Norway. As you see, not all countries have some kind of graphs there. It's because not in all countries experts suggested this specific or mentioned this specific type of fishing. Street fishing was also supposed to increase quite much in most of the countries. Norway is maybe not that clear trend here, but Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, it would be something to increase. When it comes to specific species, there was expectation there would be increase in multi-species fishing in Norway and Sweden, a bit less clear trend in Finland. Predator fishing, increase in Finland, in Sweden, less of a trend in Denmark and Norway. There would be also expected increase in coastal fishing for sea trout in Denmark and in Sweden, and a bit of increase also in Norway. On the other hand, when it comes to sea trout and salmon fishing in rivers, there were quite many differences between countries. So you can see that in Denmark and Sweden, there was expectation there would be increase, and maybe also Iceland a bit. But then when it comes to Finland and Norway, there was clear expectation that there would be decrease in salmon and sea trout fishing in rivers. Then we looked also into different behaviors, and the first one is a group of behaviors is linked to stewardship. So basically, in all countries, most of the experts expected increase in stewardship, thinking stewardship activities like boycotting harmful companies, increased catch reporting. In Nordic countries, there is no obligatory catch reporting in most cases. So this is based on voluntary reporting, and it's not that common, but there is expectation there will be increase in that and more awareness that this is important for planning management. And there are also activities to minimize impacts of fishing on fish stocks and on environment, and also more involvement in restoring fish habitats was expected. Then when it comes to social interactions, expectation that quite much increase in most of the countries, especially Finland, Iceland, and Sweden, when it comes to fishing with family. In some countries also when it comes to fishing with friends, Finland, Sweden, and Iceland especially, a bit also in Denmark, a bit less. It's also expectation by experts that participation in competition would decrease in Finland and Norway. And then there was no change in other of the countries. Very clear expectation, technology use will increase. We also have seen it in the first presentation on this session today, that use of social media, it's very important, and it decreased over years. And there is also prediction that this trend will continue. There will be quite much use of social media and other new technologies related to recreational fishing. So this is really a big consensus across all the Nordic countries. And finally, catch orientation. Expectation is that catch and release will increase basically in all of the Nordic countries. And kind of logical result of it, that fishing for food would decrease, especially, in most of the countries. Maybe Sweden, the trend is not that clear, but the other countries, yes. So there was some of the results. We have more, but just for the sake of this very short presentation, a short summary of what I have just shown. What is expected in Nordic countries in the next decade is definitely increase in fly fishing. And some reasons that experts mentioned, it's kind of seen as more sustainable way of fishing, very aesthetic, beautiful type of fishing. Some experts believe that young people get more interested in this type of fishing. I think mostly from Iceland, there were experts that claim that. Then decrease in ice fishing, which is kind of, I guess, something that we can expect because of climate change. In quite many areas, there is no more ice, or not enough ice, or less ice, or shorter periods of ice on the lakes, and basically this leads to less fish, less ice fishing. What's also expected is increase in predator street fishing and also fishing in lakes or rivers, with the exception of Denmark, where it was expected to decrease fishing in rivers. Salmon angling is expected to increase in Denmark, but decrease in all other countries. As a lot of, there will be a lot of increase in awareness, environmental issues, stewardship activities. At least this is expected, and this is what experts believed will happen. And then changes in catch orientation. There's more and more awareness that catch and release can protect fish stocks, but also it shows that people actually are there fish there not for food, but for enjoyment, for just being there, for their well-being. And then technology use. Kind of obvious, we know how fast this is changing. This morning at breakfast, I just had to use QR code to order my breakfast. We don't have it in Europe yet. It took me 10 minutes to actually get through the whole process. And we can see it in all kind of activities in our lives now. So recreational fishing is not an exception. So just to, this is technology, okay. I pressed the wrong one. Not that much of a summary, but basically there are some similarities. If you think here in Australia and Nordic countries, you think like one big thing, but they differ also a little. And depending on some cultural, environmental, management, governance issues, there can be some differences in what is happening in recreational fishing. But there are also some things that are quite similar, the fly fishing, ice fishing, like global trend in climate change, of course, impacts us in all these countries in the same way. And thank you. This is part of our team. We are more, but yeah, and it's me fishing. I don't fish that often, but yeah, I did at some point. For sea trout, it was cold and wet, but really, I really enjoyed it. Hey, any questions?
We'll do questions at the end.
Oh, okay.
Thanks very much for that informative presentation. We'll do questions at the end. Yeah. Our next speaker, Samuel Blyth, will be speaking to us about comparing motivations and satisfaction between avid anglers and the general public, a case study on recreational fishing in Stockholm. So, Samuel, over to you. Now, I think you use this. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and it's nice to be able to follow Gosia since Stockholm being in Sweden, in the Nordic countries, same area of the world, but getting a little bit more narrowed down instead of the multi-country, multi-expert, broader perspective. So I'm glad you're all here, and hopefully I can share some interesting material. This is preliminary results from a project I've been involved in for a couple of years now that we're just finally getting through the data on. Today I'm going to give you a little bit more information on the context of the specific local area. It's great following the broad regional perspective in the last presentation. Some of the objectives we have and the questions we're asking, where we want to, what management issues and things we want to cover here. And then some of the preliminary findings that we have looking at who's in this fishery, who are these groups of anglers that we're looking at, and what differences and similarities we have in why they're fishing, what they're doing when they're fishing, and how that applies to some of the catches, and looking forward or back at their perceived view of what trends have happened in the stocks for various species here. So to start with, within Sweden, we've got kind of two major bodies of recreational fishing. On the coasts and the largest lakes, these are open access fisheries, so similar to, I guess, some of the states here in Australia, where no fishing license is required, but there are rules and regulations set at the national level. And then, as I talked about yesterday, all other freshwater fishing falls under private fisheries management. Today I'm talking about the first side, the open access fisheries. And as we saw earlier in this session, Sweden came up, and the Nordic countries, as parts of the world where we have relatively high participation in recreational fishing. It's currently just over 15% of the population fishing last year in Sweden, and that amounts to about 1.5 million people. So quite a large number of people getting out there on the water. And I'd say we target a diverse range of species and diverse range of methods. It's nothing compared to the opportunities here in Australia, but compared to some of the other European countries, it is quite a range of different fishing opportunities that are presented. But despite how important it is how many people are fishing, we're faced with relatively low resolution international data on angler participation and what's happening with the fish they're targeting. And as researchers, we often find ourselves targeting the more avid people. The last presentation was a great example how we're reaching out to the experts. They're giving us their views, and it's good to talk to the experts. When we're sending out surveys, we're often looking at maybe higher value fisheries, which are participated in by more avid anglers who are already maybe more engaged in looking for best practices or improving what they're doing. Or we're reaching out to people at angling tournaments, or just having the standard response biases, the people that are excited about fishing that answer our questions when we ask them. And so we want to know, in this play or this context where we have so many people participating in fishing, how much are we missing if we're getting more of our information from the avid anglers, and where do the regular people who maybe only go a couple of times a year fit into the broader picture of what they're catching, what they're doing, and how does our management cover them or not? And to answer this, we looked in more detail in a smaller scale of that open access fishery around Stockholm, the capital of Sweden. And this is an archipelago area in the, I'd say central Baltic, but maybe some of the other people in the room would say the central Baltic's further south. Here we've got multiple target species, some that, cod, flatfish, things that are more marine, and then other freshwater species kind of blending in this area. But also a lot of people participating. There's 20% of the country's population would live in the area shown on this map, actually probably even more than that, but in our study portion of the area. So a lot of people fishing, and this is the area that's, they don't have to buy a license, it's very close to home, a highly used fishery. And so in this area, we targeted 2 groups with surveys, one being the general public, so the mail-out survey, at the end of the summer fishing season, asking them about their activities during the previous 3 months. And then 3 rounds of surveying sent out to members of the National Angling Association called Sportfiskarna. I've shortened it to SF, Serious Fishers. I think that translates well to English that way. And looking at their fishing activity at the end of 3 different seasons through the year. So we can compare differences in avidity between the 2 groups, but then also some differences, seasonal differences. And this survey had a series of questions, kind of standard angler characterization things, asking about who they are, why they fish, things like that. And then also looking at what their catch rates, release rates, different target species, and quite interestingly, which I don't have time here to get into in a lot of detail, but their perception of stock trends for the various species they're targeting, which is quite cool. At a general human level, they're quite similar groups, similar age distribution and gender. It's a bit different just based on who's members of the angling club, but similar as people. But the Angling Association members, more of them lived in the archipelago, and as I'll get into on the next slide, have more angling experience overall, and were, as anticipated, as why we targeted them, they were more avid anglers. And we can see that in a number of measures. From the previous slide, the year's experience, this figures total days fishing, or the higher the bar, the less days that group had in the previous season. But the Angling Association fishes more. They also are more specialized in the gear that they use. More of them own boats and more of them use boats for their fishing activity in the archipelago area. They used a wider range of fishing gears, ones that often maybe require higher investment cost-wise or skill to use. And they were more successful in their fishing efforts, catching more fish and being more successful at catching the fish they were targeting on any given fishing trip. But despite how different they are in their avidity, as why we selected them, we were or we're surprised to see how similar they are in some of their actual motivations for fishing and what they report as getting back from their fishing experience. And the next slide's a bit busy. I just want to state that before we jump into it. So here I've got a lot going on, but I hope you can see that the general pattern between the top section and the bottom section, the two groups, are actually quite similar, with similar peaks for higher motivation around nature and relaxation, and generally similar patterns in their overall motivations for fishing, and that the patterns are repeated in their motivations for fishing in the specific study area, which was another set of questions that we asked. There were a few areas where mean scores for motivation were significantly different, notably some of the catch motivation, with the more avid anglers being more motivated by numbers and big fish and less motivated by consumptive components of their catch. And the public being more motivated for some of the social reasons, wanting to fish with family and friends, things like that. And interestingly, particularly with respect to some of the work we're doing in the private fisheries management questions in Sweden, the more avid anglers were more motivated in their fishing decisions by how much information they could find on regulations and things like that in the places they could fish. This general similarity between the two groups is also mirrored in the satisfaction they reported from their previous season's fishing in our study area, with the broad trends of things that they appreciated or thought were poor being quite similar between the groups, with a few a little bit less pronounced differences between the two groups, with the catch satisfaction being a bit lower for the more avid anglers, but them being more satisfied by the nature components of their fishing experiences, as well as the degree of relaxation they could experience. And that some of these trends, particularly the catch components, we could see, and I apologize for not having this up here, but some greater differences between the two groups, or greater differences between the different seasons for the more avid anglers than there were between the two groups looking at their responses for the same season. And these things are also mirrored when we get into the actual target species and how much they were catching. And again, I apologize for not including the seasonal breakdown for the avid anglers here, but the broad similarity between the two groups of how the main species they're targeting are distributed shows that they are quite similar, although there is a little bit more even distribution across target species for the more avid anglers. And the differences, again, are more pronounced when we look at the different seasons where they're active, which makes sense given that you're more likely to catch some species in the spring and fall and not likely to target them in the summer. Their actual catches, we can see that the more avid anglers, as I mentioned before, are catching more fish, but they're also releasing more of their catches. They're able to catch a wider range of species, and if I included the other seasons, it was 18 species, but it's not really a fair comparison to the public only fishing during the summer. But again, these cases of seasonal variation were often much larger than the differences between the two avidity groups for the same season, which is something that's quite interesting to take forward looking at when we're targeting surveys and when we're wanting to ask questions about how these fisheries are being used. I think I've got enough time to get into this in a little bit more detail than I had planned, but we also have this perception of the stock trends in this area, and for the main species being targeted, the long-term perception is that things are getting worse, and this is broadly supported by the stock data that we have for the area. But we can see the more avid anglers have a little bit more nuances to their perceptions of how the different species are doing, and a slightly more positive view for some of the salmonids that reflects a positive response to improved habitat restoration and work like that that's occurred in this area over the last number of years. And this is a set of data that we want to look into in more detail, comparing it to the actual stock trend data that we have for this area to see which of these groups is actually more accurate in their perception of what's going on, and if some of their motivations for targeting certain species could be tied to their perception of how that's species is doing, and if we can adjust their behavior by improving their communication of what's actually going on in these fisheries. The National Angling Association does a lot of work in promoting habitat restoration and providing information on the status of fisheries and things to their members. And this is potentially quite a good validation, or a step towards validating the importance of the work that they're doing to provide education to people. And if we're looking at, they have about 60,000 members nationally. That's a very, very small percentage of the total population fishing in Sweden. And if we can find ways to provide that information to the general public, we could take some big steps towards addressing some of the management issues that exist for recreational fishing here. And maybe this is something that could be applicable to a lot of other countries and a lot of other fisheries around the world. So in conclusion, we had a lot more similarities, or in going through this data, we're still working on a lot more than we expected, given how different these groups of anglers are when looking at the average member of the Angling Association versus the average member of the general fishing public. But some differences that definitely matter for management questions around recreational fishing, around catches, what they're targeting, how much effort they're putting in, and where they're viewing this fishery as functioning to meet the reasons why they go fishing in the first place. But we, or at least when I'm looking at this data, I find myself still questioning, who should we be targeting in a particular survey or question. There are cases where what we're doing looking at avid anglers is still very applicable, because maybe they are catching more fish in that particular species of interest that we're looking at. But we need to keep in mind these seasonal variations, and depending on the question we're asking, maybe focus more on the when we're asking the question, and rather than who and how much time we have to invest in getting data from the much broader public. In this particular study, it was a lot more time consumption and more expensive to be sending out postal surveys to the general public than it was to just go to the Angling Association and ask them to send a survey to X number of their members in this area. And so that's something we have to take into account when we're looking at what data we can collect and the resources we have as researchers or management bodies going forward. With this particular study, or hopefully it's going to turn into a couple of papers, I still need to do a fair amount of work increasing the resolution of the analysis that I'm doing, and looking at more of the connections between the management issues we know of in this fishery and that we can identify in our data, and take this to another level of depth in what we can pull out of it. And then, as I mentioned, I'm really excited to look at how we're able to link these behaviors that the different respondents identified to their perception of where different stocks for different species are going, and how that relates to the actual trends in the data, and look at what this means for future management of these fisheries, particularly as it's an open access fishery with limited options to find other means of control and access to this information from these people participating in it. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have at the end of the session or later at any point over the next 2 days.
Yeah. There you go.
So I think just click on the name.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, Samuel. Now we've got our last speaker of the session coming up, Travis Preece, and after Travis has spoken, we'll invite all the speakers for this session to come up onto the seats up the front, and we'll just do some general Q&A depending on how time goes. But I think we're pretty good with time so far, so we should be fine for that. Travis is going to be speaking to us about enabling recreational fishing participation by providing fishing facilities, and we all know that fishermen love good facilities, so this will be very valuable. So over to you, Travis. Thank you.
Thank you. On
Click on that.
the name.
Yep.
Okie dokie. Thanks very much. Very pleased to be here. It's great to have an in-person conference once again. So, thought I'd do an introduction, a little bit about myself and where I'm from. So, obviously, my name's Travis Preece. I'm from Tasmania. I work for the Department of Natural Resources and Environment in the recreational fisheries team. So I'm avid recreational fisher, have been for 35 years. Yeah, it's a great family pastime for myself. Grew up doing it with my father, and now I pass on, do it with my kids as well. So that's my daughter. When I was a fish care coordinator, that was about 5 years ago. So a little bit about Tassie too. Victoria reckons they've got a world-class rec fishery here, but I tell you what, Tasmania's pretty good. Like, we've got probably one of the best trout fisheries, brown trout fisheries in the world. You can drive an hour to the coast. You can be in bass strait catching southern bluefin tuna. You can be catching 90 centimetre plus King George whiting, believe it or not, in Tasmania. And we've actually got a great sword fishery off the east coast of Tasmania as well, where the average size of swordfish is around 200 kilo. So that's a little bit about Tassie. That's my cell. So I'm just going to give a broad overview of the Better Fishing program, which I head up as a project officer. So fishing facilities, I think Australia finds this, and probably worldwide, that over probably the last 20 or 30 years we've lost a lot of access to our public infrastructure, whether that's to privatisation or work health and safety issues. So to try and overcome a little bit of this in Tasmania, in May 2021, the Tasmanian government made an election commitment of $2 million to provide infrastructure and facilities to encourage participation in recreational fishing. So obviously we needed a program to roll this funding out, so that's where the Better Fishing program come around. So yeah, so the aim of the program is to enhance recreational fishing opportunities through facilities, so such as jetties, pontoons, cleaning stations at those facilities, and some boat ramps and toilets near facilities. And obviously making it easier for disadvantaged and disabled people to access these facilities as well was key. So to start off with, we sort of wanted a baseline to see what we had in the state. So we actually did a statewide infrastructure audit in summer 2022, and that was a statewide infrastructure audit, so close to 100 sites were audited around the state of Tasmania. And while we're there, it was really good. Coming out of COVID, a lot of people out fishing, so we spoke to those rec fishers that were on site, so we get a lot of their information, what they wanted, where and when. And we also did a lot of social media around that same time, asking for information and comments. So yeah, we collected the data electronically using SurveyMonkey, and it's probably a bit different, but it worked really well. We could do it all in the field on our phones, on our tablets, and obviously then it just went into the SurveyMonkey database, and we could pull it out at a later stage. So so once that was finished, we compiled the infrastructure report, and that'll aid in determining areas to target for upgrades, and help me to go and target the councils that would like to probably apply for grants. So that's hopefully will be released next month, so it's just still in draft form. But yeah, so another part of that data that we didn't sort of realise that we would be able to use was we're actually rebuilding our website at the same time. So we've got a standalone Fisheries Tasmania website now outside the government, and so that gives us a lot better control. So we've actually got an interactive map on our website where we can go, and every facility that we audited on site can actually click on that, and it'll give you all the details of those facilities, even down to what species of fish that you can hopefully target at that spot. That's been really popular. So a little bit about the fishing grants. So we had a 2021 we rolled out small grants up to $10,000. That was our first round, and then our second round we rolled out $15,000 small grants and larger grants which were up to $150,000. In the first round we had 5 successful grants, and they were fish cleaning stations and some upgrades of lighting and some water pumps on a jetty at King Island. So, and we also funded some also funded, yeah, it was a radio control base for a local tuna club in the southeast. So, yeah, and 2 large grants have just been granted in the last, has been signed off by the Minister in the last couple of weeks. So they are both in the south of the state. The one in the bottom right-hand corner it's actually a breakwall for a ferry terminal in Bellerive, near Blunston Arena in the south of the state. The council didn't realise that it would be used for recreational fishing, but obviously they put a walkway out there, and as soon as that happened, it was heavily utilised for rec fishing. So, yeah, so the grant is for some cleaning tables, some lighting, some water to try and have it a bit better for rec fishers. And the other one is a brand new floating pontoon structure down at Portion, which is south of Hobart, where they lost access to their main wharf due to privatisation. So this is very new for Tassie, FADs and artificial reefs. So before I start, this probably isn't my story to tell a little bit. Marine and Safety Tasmania were the ones that got the implementation part of the project for this, so they've done all the environmental permitting and all that for this. Yeah, but they're not here, so it all falls under the Better Fishing program. So we've got 5 existing FADs in the water as we speak. They're all on the east coast of Tasmania. They're all the 2 in the north in the deeper water are in around 80 metres, and the other 2 are in around 20 metres. So the main target species for these FADs were yellowtail kingfish. So they're deployed from September to July, and they're modelled on the New South Wales design. And yeah, as I said, Marine and Safety Tasmania implemented the project, and now once they're in the water, we have actually taken over the running of the project now. So in 2021, we worked with Marine and Safety Tasmania. We just wanted to trial these FADs for a few months just to make sure we had all our hardware correct, and in those sort of months we usually get a few east coast lows come down the coast, so we wanted a bit of weather on them, and luckily we did. We had about a 6 metre sea on the FAD off St Helens for about 3 days, so that gave it a good test and everything was good. So, and then we thought we would do a quick survey of the wreck fishes in May when they were pulled out, just to see if they were being utilised in that short time. So we actually got 143 responses for that survey, and 72% of those people we intended to catch yellowtail kingfish. Yes, 203 fish were reportedly caught around the FADs in that short period of time, and yes, this is a bit of a shock for us. It was actually striped tuna being the most common caught. We reckon it was mainly for the St Helens one. Well, it was the St Helens one because that's sort of in that area where the striped tuna are caught, and then it was Australian salmon and yellowtail kingfish. So we've actually got 11 new FAD locations that we've just consulted on. There was a huge cry out for the north of the state and probably the far southeast to put some FADs in, and we've been hearing that on the ground for a long time. So we've got AgFest every year in Tasmania. You get 60 to 80,000 people through the site in 3 days, so we actually did a lot of consultation there. We had that pin board there up on the top right hand corner every day, and as you can see, the north of the state, was very popular. So, and we also did some social media posts as well, calling for locations, and we got exactly the same feedback there. So, yeah, so once we sort of worked out a general area, we contacted a lot of the local avid rec fishers in the area, got their sort of take where they reckon the best location for FAD would be. Obviously, these are to target yellowtail kingfish again, and we had to try and stay out of shipping lanes and that, so that our consultation will be a lot easier. So yeah, so, and particularly in the southeast, we've got an issue with our sand flathead. They've just been assessed as depleted, so we're trying to put some FADs in down there that near the population centre of Hobart, so that we can probably try and take a little bit of pressure off the sand flathead and maybe steer people more onto the pelagic species. So yeah. And these locations have just been consulted on, and through our representative bodies, Tarfish, TISIC, which is Tasmanian Seafood Industry Council, the commercial sector, and our waterway managers, Tasports and Marine and Safety Tasmania. And I'd just like to thank Tarfish too. They actually did a survey as part of their consultation, and yeah, it virtually backed up what we were hearing on the ground, that everyone wanted FADs in the north of the state. And by the sounds of it, they were pretty happy with our locations that were picked. So yeah, thanks for that, Tarfish. And artificial reefs, this is very new for Tassie as well. So this come out of a 2017 state government election promise to install 2 artificial reefs in the state. Same, Marine and Safety Tasmania were given the implementation part of the project, and after extensive consultation, there was 2 sites chosen, one at Turners Beach in the north of the state, that is about halfway between Devonport and Burnie, if anyone knows Tasmania, and then the other one is in Great Bay, which is south of Hobart, on the inside of Bruny Island. So both these reefs are intended to, the target species are snapper, which is an emerging species in Tasmania. And as of 2 weeks ago, both those sites have now been installed in the state. And that's the Great Bay FAD artificial reef going in there. That's actually the old Bruny Island ferry that's installing that. So yeah, so that's me, but I just thought I'd do a quick lessons learned, particularly with the better fishing grants. The larger grants last year now, we actually had open for about 7 months. We did an expressions of interest. So we opened it around March and closed it in October. And we found that all the councils just virtually put their submissions of interest in right at the, you know, probably 2 weeks before October, the end date. So yeah, next time we'll definitely probably only put a 2-month period on it. So, and the need to proactively approach councils and land managers to apply for these grants, particularly in Tasmania. It's pretty new having marine infrastructure just for rec fishing grants available. So yeah, and that's where my infrastructure report will be very handy for that. And FADs and artificial reefs, so probably the end user, that's us, and the rec fish, probably to be a little bit more involved in the implementation part of the project. So just so we can sort of gear up the environmental monitoring permits, that kind of thing, to suit us a little bit better. And FADs, that's what I want to talk to a lot of the jurisdictions in Australia that have got FADs. We would like to try and get as close to real-time tracking on our FADs as we can, because we've actually had a couple of FADs break away last season, and we only get 6 hourly updates. So particularly if they get to the continental shelf, they can move quite a long way in 6 hours. So yeah, so that's me. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Travis, and thank you for all of our 5 speakers for your contributions today. That's been terrific. What we'll do now is go into the Q&A session. So if I could ask our speakers who are still here to come up and join us up the front. Might just need to be careful of those, you know, hit your head on that screen. Pull the chairs forward. Yeah, thank you, John. We've obviously also got people who are watching and participating online. They may not be able to ask questions, but they can certainly hear what we are saying and can see us as well. So what we'll do is there's a microphone up the front. I think in terms of audio for the people at home, if the speakers up the front can use the microphone for answering the questions, that would be terrific. And for people asking, if you could sort of just raise your voice. Oh, we've got a microphone up here, up the back as well. I'm wondering. Oh, I've got a good. We have to use the mic for every questions and answers. So we've got 5 great speakers. So have we got a question that can lead us off? And we'll just do this fairly quickly. Some short answers, please, so we can get through as many questions as we can. But we'll do it in a sort of a fairly informal way as well. So who's got the first question for one of our speakers? Yeah, absolutely.
So my question's about the bushfire response. So you mentioned there's a billion animals were killed on the surface. Was much thought put into the process of actually, targeting fishing into areas that have probably been decimated in the water as well? Because it's Queensland, we have quite regular events, I guess you'd say, and often the tourism industry stays away from trying to attract people into those areas while you've got that recovery period going on, not just for the community, but for the natural environment as well. You don't want to be putting additional pressure into those spots.
Yeah, great question. There's no doubt that that was a consideration. From a local perspective in Malgorzata, we actually didn't see that many visible blackwater events. After the fires we had, quite sustained, rain events that, prevented a lot of, significant runoff compared to up New South Wales coast and things like that. So in that early phase, we had bushfires from the 30th of January, 31st of December, all the way till about the 5th of March. So 3 months of constant fires, and it was more about, getting people back to the area, their health and well-being, at that stage more than the recovery of the resource. During that period, over 3 months of the bushfires, there pretty much was zero fishing, and we've actually seen, results of, seagrass meadows and things like that come back as a result of, rain and things like that, and the fishing has improved on the ground, just, from what I've seen. Got no science to back that up, obviously, but yeah, it definitely has improved. And COVID, bushfires, there has been not a lot of people fish that area.
Must work for Travis. I thought all the presentations were great. Just put it out there. I'm going to ask a question about the avids versus the non-avids. And I suppose the question that wasn't answered was, can you actually manage them differently given sort of the relatively large scale we've got to manage fisheries at? So did you have any thoughts about, how you could actually manage an avid versus a non-avid? It's good to get the data, but if you haven't got a tool, it sort of becomes not so useful, if that makes sense.
Thanks. That's a great question, and I mean, it's a big thing that we're looking at. Is we have a lot of avenues that we're able to target the avid anglers. I mean, just from an information perspective, giving people information on better ways to do things doesn't mean they'll do it, but it makes it harder for them to make a bad decision. And the less avid anglers are often the ones who are not on social media. They're not the ones that are watching fishing videos. They're not going to go out of their way to read how to do things. And so getting that information to them and managing them differently, or just helping them to be a better, more helpful part of the management structure we have in place is a big question. And some of this data we hope to see, or one of the initial reasons for doing this was looking at what are we missing with how we are able to communicate to the more avid. Are we missing the people who are actually catching more fish or not catching more fish? Or the ones who are targeting the more sensitive species or not targeting the more sensitive species? And then the next step would be, how do we actually access them with information in a more meaningful way? Do the fisheries management authorities need to do more public outreach with information to the general public through more conventional media sources, rather than the things that we reach out through the Angling Association's magazine or through fishing related social media? And so that's something that we want to build on and look into, how we can, or do we need to manage them differently for particular issues. So, thank you.
I've got a question here for Eva, if that's okay. Really nice presentations, really interesting data here, because we probably got, I'm from Tasmania, so situations we're having probably quite different, because Tassie Recreational Survey is like every 5 years, rather than compare you guys is every year. So the question would be saying, because you're doing the telephone calls, surveys every year, would be participation people would be pretty much all the same group of people, or it's quite changing a lot? Because every year you keep going, probably there'll be kind of a few people will be keep going for a few years already. If that any changing for that as well, also say the number of participants is any changing trends as well.
Thanks for the question. This survey is actually a very small survey, and the sample size is only around 700 participants. So it's actually it's actually using white pages, and so it's actually from a very large sample size where we actually pick 700, and it's a quota sampling method that we're using. So that's why. And also the purpose of this survey is more to do with the, we try to actually get the key performance indicators for the department rather than information about recreational fishing. So we only ask a few questions, a very broad question about their experience and where they fish, but not into the details on what species they catch, and the effort size we didn't actually ask much, and the catch as well. So that will be done in with other survey, which is a more targeted survey and other objectives. So that's why for this one we are able to actually do it every year, and the main thing we come out is the participation rate that we're interested in. Yeah.
Dobry, maybe a question. Hope that's in Polish. Just. Yeah, no, that's it. Sorry, my Polish friends, that's probably the nicest word I've learned. So we won't go there. I just have a question. There was a theory around continuation from, an average angler into a specialist angler, and it takes time, and there's this beautiful theory around a continuum. But with the likes of Robson and, all the internet and information that people can just go by the tech, is there any work that's been done in Europe that looks at, how, we're going to have more fly fishers, they're more specialised. Is there a way that people have been parachuted straight in to be these technical experts? So we short-circuited all of that, the time that it takes to become an expert, or a wannabe expert, I should say, because I go by the gear, but they might not have the same fishing impact. So I was just wondering if any of the Delphi work was looking at the age classes as well within the region, and if if younger people were becoming more specialised earlier than the older people in the group.
We didn't specifically look at that. It's actually a very good idea for some follow-up studies. We looked at participation as such, like age of people. So the other part of the study that was not presented here looked at how participation will change, and this was divided into different groups, so also age groups and gender and minorities and so on. But no, we specifically didn't look at that, and I think it's a really good question that I cannot really respond to. I don't know, Lotte and Sam, you were also involved. Can you add a bit on that?
I can add a little bit, not specifically to the data from this study, but in fishery-specific studies that we're doing in the Nordic region. One of the projects I've been involved in with sea trout anglers, and starting off asking these surveys, going, all right, we've got the fly anglers and the spin anglers, and there should be an avidity difference between these two groups, and that gear choice wasn't a valid point to divide them on. That, gear, you can have, just the fly angler thing doesn't mean that you're specialized. You can be extremely specialized, highly invested in a range of different fishing methods. And so, just at a fishery-specific level, there's a lot more to unpack there as to how we're measuring people being more avid on a gear basis. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, got at the back.
Thanks everyone for your talk. So I just got a quick one for Travis there on your new artificial reefs that you put out off Tasmania there. I was wondering what your metric for success for those will be. You might have discussed this and I missed it, but whether it was purely about a participation, or is it in terms of the catch relative to the catch around them? and how do you go about measuring that?
Yeah, thanks. That's definitely a work in progress, but it'll be obviously participation and catch obviously. But I think mainly it'll probably be through survey data. I reckon that we'll do that, and there'll be a lot of environmental monitoring too. That'll probably include bruvs as well, so we'll be able to see different species that are on site. But that'll be surveying wreck fishes will be our main one.
Another one for you then. I appreciated how you touched on the dusky flathead at the end and using these tools to push fishing pressure away from species that are under maybe too much in a particular fishery. How much is that a part of your assessment process for the other projects where you're putting in FADs or putting in these reefs, or the improving access is the assessment of the state of the stock and how much pressure is likely to increase part of your process when granting approval or getting the funds to build particular projects, or how big a role does that play?
Yeah, no, definitely got a huge role in that for sure. So it was actually our sand flathead stock in Tasmania is just been classed as depleted. So that's our #1 fish species. So 70% of the fish that are caught in Tasmania actually are a sand flathead, believe it or not. So huge fishing pressure. So obviously we really need to evaluate the projects we approve, in those high urban areas where sand flathead are caught. So that's why the FADs are being rolled out in the southeast, because that's probably where the most pressure is on our sand flathead stock. So got a huge,
Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, John back in the corner at the front.
Another question for Samuel there. You looked at the catch rate difference between the public and the avids, and probably wasn't that much of a difference in terms of what I would have expected. Did you look at the quality of fish difference? And leading from that, noting that the avids are more likely to release than the general public, is part of that because they're more successful, they're better at getting quality fish, that they have more opportunities to make the choice about whether they keep or discard or release the fish?
Yeah, that's a great question, something that the data from the survey doesn't give us a really good window into. I mean, as far as the size of the individual fish being kept or released, it's just not high enough resolution to really say. But that's a thing that probably does contribute quite a bit, that they're able to catch the one that they want and release more. But then there's also that traditional curve of experience where more of them may be fishing more for those other reasons, which was also part of like the motivations for fishing in general, that the general public, more of them were a bit more harvest oriented than the avid anglers. And the more avid ones, I mean, the ones wanting to catch particular fish to consume. In some cases, maybe that is part of the quality thing, but a bit more complicated than just that level. But it would be interesting if we could get more information on that, for the particularly tying it to the perceived stock trends and the decision to target individual species in the first place. That maybe it's not so much the harvest, but what they're going after when they go out on the particular trip. And that side of the data we could look into in more detail.
We've probably got time for one more quick question. We've got 3 minutes left, so if there's a quick question, we could probably knock that one over. If not, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you to all our guest speakers for your presentations this morning and for the Q&A as well. So can everyone join me in please giving them a round of applause? So we'll break now for lunch, and lunch will be out in the foyer as it was yesterday. So thanks everyone for your participation, and we'll see you after lunch.